All right, Boker Tov. So let's maybe, before we get down to the questions, Gila, starting with you, just do a quick round of saying, who you are, a bit about your background, and how you ended up doing what you do today.
That is a great question. Hi, I'm Gila, Gila Hayat, born and raised here. Served for 7 years in 8200. I'm a programmer. I'm a co-founder and CTO of Darrow. We're in the sphere of legal tech. We detect when companies break the law, and we're doing it with web intelligence. That's it. We started Darrow 2 years ago, a little less than 2 years ago. Raised around about like from 80 to 90 people right now. And that's it. I was a software developer. Before that, I was an actor. I studied theater, so I'm doing a little bit in between.
Hey everyone, my name is Itay Levy. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Identiq. Okay, can you hear me? Okay, good. I started my career as a software developer, joined my brother who started a startup back when the internet just started. We tried to figure out what people are saying online. Later, we acquired a couple of companies in the US and sold the company to Nielsen. So he was the founder. I just joined him when we were at our basement. I didn't know, no one will hire me after the bubble burst. So I said I'll join him and until I'd be able to get a real job. We stayed together for 10 years after we sold the company to Nielsen in 2006. When I left, we were 1,200 people in 2010. Then started another startup, which by the name of Epoxy. We try to help mobile companies engage their customers. We sold this company to Teradata in 2015 and started Identiq with a couple of co-founders. We raised a bit over $50 million. And what we do, we are building a network helping companies to validate their customers without sharing any data. So for the first time in history, companies can know that they are dealing with legitimate people without sending their data to anyone. That's it.
Cool. Hi, can you hear me? I'm Sagi Gidali. I'm the Chief Growth Officer of Entrée 81. I started my career when I was 9 years old, started to design and sell stickers to kids in school, so that was fun. So I'm coming from design background, product background. Also studied computer science and economics, and back then in the university I met my co-founder, Amit Bareket. We started our first company. It was a B2C solution that we bootstrapped. It called Safer VPN. It was a success. But at the end, we saw like a bigger opportunity and in the B2B market, and we decided to begin with Entrée 81, raise more than $100 million, growing super fast. We did it in 2018. More than 2,000 paying customers, protecting organizations, the internal assets, the resources, and replacing the traditional VPNs, firewalls for the modern workforce.
Thank you very much. So just funny stories about these three. So Gila, when we joined the Darrow board, it was the first board meeting ever, I think, to start with the slide improv. True story. So that's how Darrow likes to start their board. And Itay actually started his last company in our offices. And it took us, I think, 3 hours of meetings and whiteboarding to understand exactly how disruptive what it is that the guys are building. And actually, I remember when you and I didn't meet for the first time. I heard about you. I had a friend from school who worked for an accountant who did your books for Safer VPN. And she told me there's this one company. They're printing money. It's unbelievable. Just better than everybody else. And that's how I started chasing you guys. So going back, and I think, Itay, you being obviously serial, and also maybe Sagi speaking about, Perimeter and Identiq, because what happened 20 years ago and 10 years ago is a bit different from today's market, just a bit. So how did you know, and this goes to all of you, that you were ready to raise? And again, let's start from Gila.
I think we knew we were ready to raise when we started gaining traction, and we wanted to get it on because we saw the signs that Darrow was going to good places.
So customers saying, I want to pay.
No, customers paid. That was a good sign. We started off with paying customers. We skipped the willingness to pay to payment pretty quickly, and we were laser focused on that in order to even hold ourselves high enough to go out and raise. This was our initial obsession of going there, validating as fast as possible, and gaining actual traction and payments. That was
cool. And Itay, your company is a bit different. I mean, that is impossible your company, just to explain, is a network play. Okay, you need to get a bunch of people on the network before there starts being value. So how did you think about fundraising for this company?
So for us, it was clear that we need to make sure that we have enough capital before we start. Otherwise, we won't be able to get it off the ground. So before we started, we tried to figure out, sorry about that. So before we started, we tried to figure out how much money we need. And then we went out and raised more than we needed because smart people told us that it won't be enough. And that's exactly what we do. And then probably we needed more cash than we thought at the beginning. But I will say, it's important to know that you have enough runway because a lot of companies fail to meet their goals, and sometimes the road is not as straight as you think. So we knew we are ready to raise when we had like a checklist of everything we need to do. And when we completed this checklist, which was a lot, we spoke to a lot of customers, we understood the technology inside and out. We knew everything we need to do, but we haven't started doing anything other than making sure that we understand and we can explain it to everyone. And then we started speaking to just one or two friendly VCs to see that we are ready. And just when we felt that we are ready, only then we started. And before then, if it was back to the drawing board and how to tell the story better and how to do this in the right way.
And Sagi, and we'll get back to how you chose which investors to go and speak to. So your company was a bit funny, right? I mean, you had revenue. You had 30 employees or more. You were essentially profitable. And then you decided that the world is bigger and you want to go after something different. So how did you think about the company that you had, raising capital? And this happens a lot. I'm not sure if there's anybody in the audience which has a company that's predominantly it's services company, it generates cash flow, then you figure out you can build a product out of it, and then you have to decide, do I raise money for the whole thing as a cluster, or do I split and sell, or what do I do with the services company while I build my startup? So how do you think of that?
Yeah, it was a very tough decision back then. It was 2018 when we did it, when we took the decision. Safer VPN, we started around 2014, 2015. We bootstrapped the company, we generated cash, we had like the money, so we didn't get the money from investors. And when we did so many mistakes in the first ventures. We were like very cost efficient, so we didn't pay like high salaries. We took interns. We didn't progress as we expected. And when we shifted to the next company, after we learned everything, we said, okay, let's do it the right way. So we took capital from the acquisition, what we sold from the first company, and also took money from investors to accelerate the growth of Printer 81. And then in the first year, we managed to acquire 300 paying customers. So we took the technology from the first company, then we combined it with the new company, and then we managed to bring to the market very, very fast the company itself, like our product.
And maybe this one's for Gila. So you did a pre-seed round with Darrow, right? With F2, and then after that, a full-blown seed and the A. How do you why would you go down that road? You think why did you and your partners decide to do that?
Well, I think that first I want to relate to what you said about being cash efficient and starting off by just validating certain points. So we knew that we've hit this like business angle that we wanted to go after, and in order to validate that, we didn't want to go on a full-on round and use up all our time in order to talk to investors rather than building the product and understanding the market. So we needed, I think, maybe we needed less or wanted to remain efficient and not go full blown in order to starting building before we understand the market. This problem is for us because we're doing legal, so there's a lot of market education that needs to be done, and try to understand it and make it into understandable rather than cyber or anything like that. So we needed to focus on that.
So taking less money quickly to validate the points before going to raise a bigger round. Now,
yes, we knew our questions that we needed to validate, so we were focused on them and debunking only those myths and trying to understand how we should carry on. Because if once we solve that question, then it's either bootstrapping or raising on capital.
and then, so you optimize for speed, which is, I think, the Darrow story, at least up to date. And how do you decide who to talk to? Because you have various angels, micro funds. How do you decide who you wanted to talk to?
So we talked to pretty much everyone because you really don't know where the best piece of advice will come to you, and we would both optimizing is for speed and building the community around it, because we are the thing that analyzes in Darrow is the community, the justice community. So we wanted to talk about it to anyone who is willing to listen, and we ended up going with partners that took the time to understand a problem. Instead of trying to pitch every week or on a monthly basis, trying to pitch your startup again to your investor, then we ended up working with people and investors that took the time to learn the work that we put into the market, the unique market that we're serving, etc.
So people who you felt that got it and believe in sort of the mission statement of the company.
We're willing to put the time in order to understand something that is unique.
That is not B2B SaaS, yeah.
Like, you can look at simple market research, but like putting into that those niche parts of the internet and bringing value even before the official relationship started.
Cool. And so, Itay, back in the day, you had a big seed round for 2018. And I remember us as a partnership sort of saying, damn, man, those guys are raising a lot of money and it's expensive, but they're good, and should we do it? So how did you determine the amount? Was it like bottom-up Excel or just the market, or how do you think of that?
It's both. First, we needed to understand, we tried to estimate how much money we actually need, how many people we need to hire, how much time it will take us. We're working with very large companies. The processes there are slow, so you need to do a lot before you get to the next round. And apparently, what we did wasn't enough, but it took us to the point where we can raise a bit more money. And the second was also, you look at the market and you speak to other entrepreneurs and you ask, okay, what can you actually do? Because at the end of the day, if what you need doesn't meet what the market is capable of doing, then you have a problem. And so we had this list of investors who, and then we started qualifying them based on if they can do a round like this, and also two other questions. Do we want them? Do we want to work with them? What people need to understand is that taking money from someone, it's not just a question of, hey, do they like your product and can I use this money? It's much more than this. It's like marriage with kids. You cannot divorce. It's very hard to divorce an investor. You should choose investors that you would like to spend time with, that you actually believe that they can add value to your company. And for us, this was a very major decision. And last but not least, we also asked them, the investors, if they are okay with a play like this, because a lot of local investors, they would like to, back in 2018, this was before this IPO madness, people, a lot of companies told us, a lot of investors or a lot of VCs told us that they would like us to sell the companies when we are at a few $100 million valuation. And for us, this was a big no-no. We looked for investors who had large enough, I won't say it, but they were a big believer in us, and they were willing to go until IPO, and they believed that we can build a very, very large company. And for us, it was a big qualification, even if it meant that we reduce our small list to even a smaller list. And this is exactly what we've done.
So I think you made super interesting points here that I want to iterate on. So let's review. How you chose the amount to be raised was both bottom up, so how many engineers do I need, how many salespeople, Excel, to see the amount, and then you ask around and say, okay, what's market? What are seed rounds these days? What are valuations? What are the check sizes? Then you mesh those together, and you build a list of what investors you want to approach based on, obviously, the amount and can they write the check, but then also, do they resonate with my vision? Can they be a long-term partner? And that goes to maybe what Gila said about people who get it. So people who you feel that are really in it with you all the way, which is very interesting as a VC, because we often, win deals, right? Like it's a competitive deal and we want to win the deal. And most often than not, especially in this market, the way to win a deal is more valuation, right? Bigger check size or secondary. And I don't think that we as investors give enough time to evaluate and to really discuss with the founders and understand that this is actually might be more important to them than playing with the numbers. And that's maybe how better partnerships are formed than deals struck. And Sagi, going back to your fundraising, and again, because yours is, like nobody's vanilla, right? Definitely not these three companies. But is there anything you change? Not on say for VPN, but on Parameter. Once you decided you're going B2B and you want to raise funding, and after you sort of bootstrapped or sort of say self-funded, right? The pre-seed stage. From that point on, is there anything that you would change on what you do, and what do you think you did good or bad, and what would you change?
Funding-wise?
Yeah.
So
First round.
I think that we understood at the end that you must do like a very good, not only the VCs doing due diligence on the company, but you need to do the due diligence on the investor. We had like one case where we had like an early investor where there are like three types of money. So there is like the money from investors that can harm the company, the money that can just like, it's money, but there's no sophistication, something that can assist to the company, and the investors that can take the company to the next step and give the added value. In one of the cases, we didn't do the right due diligence, and we brought to the team like an investor that make it harder for us to work as a team and to grow. And after that, we learned the lesson, and we brought like to the team like only like the top players, tier one investors.
So in retrospect, what should you have done to mitigate that? How could you avoid that pitfall?
Background check, references, talking with other companies and other founders, doing like a better research about that. So that's like our lesson learned.
Okay, so this is, again, I want to touch on this point. So when you're out raising, and you need to understand this, not all money is green. And different investors have different approaches, and this can affect you and your company. Take the time. Call other founders. Call people that have taken money from them. I find, I'm not sure if you agree with this, but the best feedback comes from founders who have worked with said fund, and even drilling down a bit further, the partner within the fund. Because a fund is one thing, and the partner that sits on the board eventually is the spouse, so to say, in Itay's metaphor. So taking the time to diligence your investors. Other than that, did you think that you raised, that you conducted a competitive process? Were you, how did you view fundraising? Did you view it as a process, as a means to an end, as something that you're focusing on, as an evil you have to deal with? What was the mindset?
So it's a process, and we are like always improving. We're like very data-centric company, so we also gather today like all the data points on the investor, and we do the comparison, and we see like the different, we do like scoring for each one of the investors, and we see if there is like a good relationship, where can you take the company, what is the strength of the investor, and based on all of these data points, we decide with whom to go. At the beginning, it was like very hard because we needed like to chase the investors. Now it's more a privilege that we can talk with almost everybody and develop, as Eran mentioned, like the relationship, which is very important to the decision point. So we develop the relationship, we talk with the investors, we create like a mutual trust between of us, and then we come to the point that everything like where we meet and get to agreement.
Perfect. And so I'd like to touch on another topic which I find interesting. So Gila, you're the CTO, right? Primarily CEO leads fundraising. Your co-founder and CEO is also a very strong-minded individual. How do you see the CTO's role, if anything, in the initial fundraise?
My answer will be both generic CTO and the fact that our team is very, very powerful in itself. And when we appear, the three of us appear together, then we realize once we've iterated on the pitch itself that it works better. So
because of the dynamic between.
Because of the dynamics, so that's a piece of advice for team dynamics. Really invest in that, because sometimes when you don't have something to sell, you sell your team, and it is apparent, especially in over Zoom. So and also many startups, I think, in the pre-seed round don't yet have a CTO. Maybe it's sometimes maybe the first hire or additional founder that comes along the way. Specifically for us, we started off by the three of us. I think it's very important for the CTO, or for me it has been very valuable to be on pitches, both because I wanted to understand the dynamics and the kinds of questions asked. Because most of the questions are about the idea, the capability of the team to perform, the defensibility of your idea and everything like that. And it's primarily, and if you're starting a tech startup, then it's primarily the job of the CTO to manage the IP of the company and try to understand how to build it. So it's very, very important to understand and be ready for the due diligence itself, maybe if it's technical due diligence or the questions asked. During that process, it has been very beneficial for me personally to be always ready for that kind of process. So whenever I'm generating content, if it's architectural design or anything like that, I'm aware that maybe in a month or so, someone's going to read it. So it really, really focuses me sometimes to not spend the time on the things that are not important or not interesting. So it really, to understand these questions early on has been very beneficial. And the last personal note, having a female founder is a force. I wanted to like slow clap for all female founders out here, if any, maybe over Zoom. Well, shout out on that. Like, it's a force. Use it. It helps. And it's really. So that's it. So it's in terms of like starting off with the CTO really focuses you. And putting together a strong team really, really helps, especially in the pre-seed. That's what helped us a lot, and we've invested in that because that's part of the business model.
And I think that also with you, maybe, and it's worthwhile stressing that, is that you're what we refer to as a customer-facing CTO. So not all CTOs are born equal, but when you have a CTO which is customer-facing, meaning very high EQ, in addition to IQ and the ability to communicate and read into the situation, it can be very valuable. I remember a few conversations when the questions geared towards more defensibility and IP and moat and NLP, and Gila's ability to just chime in and say, and chiming in when you're three founders on Zoom without interrupting the CEO and sort of, entering that flow flawlessly. Maybe that's from acting classes, I don't know. And just saying that one sentence about, NLP, blah, 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 whatever it is, and having the investor say, oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Those are the sort of things that make the pitch just like flow. Because essentially, what's a pitch, right? Like, we kill risks one by one in our heads, okay? And one of the risks in is often technology. Like, will this work? Now, this goes to, all three of you being, heavily reliant on technology, and a question of, okay, is this going to work? Is this the future? And then Itay, being so experienced, having gone through many startups, what do you think are the key learnings that you took from fundraising from each startup to the next? Like, what was the major thing you completely didn't understand the first time, and then the second time, and maybe even the third if you had one? Although the third one was actually, I think, pretty well.
So I'll start by saying, in between, I also killed 2 startups, which I also tried fundraising for one of them.
So 4 rounds overall, 4 times.
Yes. There's a lot of learning. I'm not sure we have enough time. Specifically fundraising in the last time was a very different experience than when I started. Everything have changed. The world have changed. Everything have changed. And I can also say, raising now, raising in 2002, raising in 2016, 2008, all of these were the times. So everything changes. I can say that
for the better for founders.
Sometimes for the better. Sometimes it was really hard. I mean, there were periods where it was really hard. Like you were getting into calls, and after a while you realize that that they are just wasting your time. After crisis, in 2009 and 10, it was really hard. 11, it was also hard. I can say that before this round, first of all, we started in Israel, and I don't know if this is a well-known fact, but we know that investors talk between themselves a lot. So when you go fundraising in the US, it's one thing. When you go fundraising in Israel, it's a very different thing. And you need to give it some thoughts before doing that. And because we had a short list of investors, the last thing we wanted is to burn ourselves. This is why we were very strategic about making sure that we are ready, to the point where probably we were over-ready at some point. But it was super important for us, because the last thing you want to do is to speak to the investors at the wrong time. And then once you start getting no's, then it's a problem. And we thought to ourselves, if we'll get too many no's, then we are going back to the drawing board and see how we can change everything, or change the story, or fix whatever we needed to fix. So we build a process where we can test before we go.
So that's interesting, because you built the company in our offices.
Yes.
We offered a room. You came with your co-founders. You sat there and built. How did you? And you're a very strategic guy.
Yeah. By the way, we didn't test it with you. We tested with someone else before we pitched you.
So how did you think about?
Because we wanted to close you guys, so we wanted to make sure that we are ready. We were in your office for weeks before you guys realized what we are doing.
I had no idea.
Yeah. No one had any idea what we were doing. But then Avi came in and was just starting ideation about names of the company. He didn't understand what we were doing. Then he said, okay, I want to invest. And I said, no, we are not going to take your money.
Yeah.
I don't know if Avi remembers that, but this is...
I remember someone taking our money.
And
naming the company.
Naming the company, and also deciding if the company should be in Tel Aviv or in the US. Then Ran also entered, tried to figure out what we were doing, and we kind of showed him a bit what we were doing, but we didn't pitch the company. We were super strategic about it because we wanted to do it the right way.
So you saw the value in getting actual opinions by people who you thought are maybe intelligent and experienced, and not the whole FOMO fundraising thing. for weeks.
Yeah, so first of all, as an entrepreneur, you need to be careful. At some point down the path, you need to be strategic on who you are speaking to about the company, not in terms of, it's always good to speak to people, but at some point, you just know enough to take into consideration who you're speaking to. What we are building it was so different than, for example, I knew that if I'll speak to the wrong investor, they can really, take all the air out. So I didn't speak to specific investors or even specific friends, for that matter, because I knew that they're going to...
Negative Nancy's.
Yes. That can sometimes really kill you. And after, I've been doing this for enough time to know that it can really hurt and take the wind out of everything. But then we did spoke to people we trust their opinion, and we did take a lot of constructive feedback, and we fixed a lot. And then only when we were ready, I remember we pitched, and we kind of moved from the office so we can do this properly. But very fast we told you that we are choosing you, and we want to do this together for the right reasons.
That's how we know when they're raising. They suddenly vanish. You don't see them anymore. They're out pitching. So, Sagi, I remember very clearly speaking about software-defined perimeter in 2018. And it's, these two guys, and they're talking about the death of firewall, the end of on-premise, everything is going to be in the cloud. And this was before, I think, Gartner even knew. You saw the future. I rarely see companies with that foresight of describing, and this is not their product. This is the market. Clearly, 4 years ago, what can you, and I think that, by the way, was the most compelling part of your pitch, not only in your initial fundraising, but in the ones after that. You see, with most investors, this is a long-term game. And when I saw later on that you were right about everything that you said, for me, okay, these guys have the crystal ball. I'd like to invest. So I think the value of having foresight is huge in the initial round. What advice can you give founders, or you know what, maybe share from your experience? Why or how did you see the future?
So we just listened to our customers. That's one of the biggest takeouts from that back in time.
But they were consumers in safe.
So they were consumers, but we saw two big trends in the world that happened. So our consumers, our customers, so they were digital nomads. We saw that the offices, there's no more office. It's like an empty office. So why do you need to protect the office when it's empty? And we need to find a proper solution. The hardware is not relevant anymore because resources are shifting, are moving to the cloud. And we saw that's two trends. We had around 80,000 paying customers back then. And I told to Amit, and Amit told to me, listen, there's a huge potential, a huge opportunity. Let's do something bigger. So that's where we decided to sell the first company and move to Perimeter 81 and building that product. So we validated the product, we designed partners with our previous customers and gaining more and more data, and just it was a risk, but
But you can't speak to so many people. So did you see the data that they're logging in from different IP? Because you were providing a VPN service. Did you look at the data and say, wow, this is interesting? And then second question, how did you know that this is going to be as big as it is? Because maybe it would have been just for, SMBs, maybe just small businesses, right?
Yeah. So we saw that the trends in the world. We saw that also what's happening with the internet. The internet is becoming all the 5G, fibers, the speed of the internet. It doesn't make sense to take the cables, the physical cables from the offices. We saw that the hardware, there are many breaches. It's not educated to the modern workforce. So we had all the signs, all the signals. We talk with analysts, we talk with customers, we talk with design partners. We compile all the data points. We have a data team in the company. We work with the data. We built our own internal solution that creates descriptive and predictive algorithms. And we compile all the different type of information into very insightful data points and analysis, and we saw that the potential is huge, the market is huge, every company needs this type of solution and transform into the cloud. And basically COVID was the accelerator. It came in 2020, and overnight many companies had to shift to the cloud, had to work remotely, and they couldn't do that with the old solutions. So that was like one of the biggest validators.
So you predicted Corona. So
Not taking...
So essentially, again, as Avi was saying in the previous panel, you have to work hard to get lucky.
Yes.
Okay, so we have to wrap it up. Unfortunately, there are no time to questions. 4 questions, sorry. But maybe just in a sentence, each of you can leave the audience with sort of, a piece of advice for most of these people that are going out to raise their pre-seed round.
Working with investors. Investors are part of the company. As Eran said about not all money is green. Their partners are joining your company, and and active partners generate a lot of value. And you should, for maybe it's maybe a radical perspective, but like put that money into work and put those people into work and make them work for you. And actively ask them questions and help them help yourself by making them proactive and be a part of the company. They're going to be board members. They're going to make a lot of decisions with you. And I think the partners that we chose this is the kind of relationship that we're nurturing with them, and it is very, very, especially when you're raising your pre-seed money, it's maybe tempting to become thankful for the money or things like that, but they're active partners, and they want the company to succeed if they invested in you. So help nurture that kind of relationship on a personal level and validate really the skill and the connections that the partner can give you and make that relationship mutual. I think that's my end.
I would actually say kind of the same on both sides. On one side, sometimes I remember when I raised my first capital, I was so happy that I was able to do it. It seems like the goal. It's not the goal, it's means to a goal. Even more than this, I had many cases when people told me no, and I took it very personal. I didn't thought about what does it mean to raise money, what does it do to a relationship. I didn't put myself on the seat of the other person. And now, sometimes also as an investor, you see this as well. It's much more than just saying you have a cool idea, I'll give you money. It's not that. So you need to, not only choose the right people, but also treat them with respect on one side. On the other side, you need to see that the relationship is like this. Like it's not, if you feel that the investors are, they don't look at you on the same level, then maybe it's not the right relationship. You should choose relationships that will add value to you. Not just go after every offer that you get. And also you need to educate yourself to see that it's fair. The deal is fair. Sometimes, especially for first timers, you just say yes to deals, and you don't think about the cap table and building a cap table that will actually support the company that you are trying to build. And if you're trying to build a company that will need a lot of VC money, then you should think long term about how your cap table should look like as well. And it's super, super important. And educate yourself on how this is done. So when you get to the point when you actually need to make this decision, you'll know, which is super important.
Yeah, I strongly agree with what you said. It's like it can be like a very long lecture about how to do it the right way. My advice will be to meet with many investors as possible, get perspective, understand the market, understand who is the right investor to your company, to your vertical, to your industry, what is the value that you can get from him, and take the right decision based on that.
Gila, Itay, Sagi, thank you very much. Good.